Gunodara Satam Surhi Samagame. Please repeat. Vyasaki, the son of Vyasadeva. Cha, also. Bhagavan, full in transcendental knowledge. Vasudeva, Lord Krishna. Parayana, attached to. Urugaya, of the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna, who is glorified by great philosophers. Guna Udara, great qualities. Satam, of the devotees. Syuhu, must have been. He, as a matter of fact. Samagame, by the presence of. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Shukadeva Goswami, the son of Vyasadeva, was also full in transcendental knowledge and was a great devotee of Lord Krishna, son of Vasudeva. So, there must have been discussion of Lord Krishna, who is glorified by great philosophers and in the company of great devotees. So there must have been discussion of Lord Krishna, who is glorified by great philosophers and in the company of great devotees. Purport. The word satam is very important in this verse. Satam means the pure devotees, who have no other desire than to serve the Lord. Only in the association of such devotees are the transcendental glories of Lord Krishna properly discussed. It is said by the Lord that His topics are all full of spiritual significance, and once one properly hears about Him in the association of the satam, certainly one senses the great potency and so automatically attains to the devotional stage of life. As already described, Maharaj Parikshit was a great devotee of the Lord from his very birth, and so was Shukadeva Goswami. Both of them were on the same level. Although it appeared that Maharaj Parikshit was a great king accustomed to royal facilities, whereas Shukadeva Goswami was a typical renouncer of the world, so much so that he did not even put a cloth on his body. Superficially, Maharaj Parikshit and Shukadeva Goswami might seem to be opposites, but basically they were both unalloyed pure devotees of the Lord. When such devotees are assembled together, there can be no topics save discussions of the glories of the Lord, or bhakti yoga. In the Bhagavad Gita also, when there were talks between the Lord and His devotee Arjuna, there could not be any topic other than bhakti yoga. However, the mundane scholars may speculate on it in their own ways. The use of the word cha after Vyasaki suggests, according to Srila Jiva Goswami, that both Shukadeva Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit were of the same category, settled long before, although one was playing the part of the master and the other the disciple. Since Lord Krishna is the center of the topics, the words Vasudeva Parayana, or devotee of Vasudeva, suggests devotees of Lord Krishna, the common aim. Although there were many others who assembled at the place where Maharaj Parikshit was fasting, the natural conclusion is that there was no topic other than the glorification of Lord Krishna, because the principal speaker was Shukadeva Goswami and the chief audience was Maharaj Parikshit. So, Srimad Bhagavatam, as it was spoken and heard by two principal devotees of the Lord, is only of the glorification of the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmulitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Pashyata Deshatarine. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna everyone. Thank you all for coming for the morning Srimad Bhagavatam class. I'd like to request the blessings of senior Vaishnavas that I can try to speak on this verse and be of some service to all of you, and to the Srimad Bhagavatam, to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you. So, does anybody know who is speaking this verse by chance? Is that of those who are following this section of the Bhagavatam, who's speaking this verse? Nishinga Kavacha says Shonaka Rishi. That's correct. So, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a few prominent conversations of devotees, and sometimes it's easy to get lost in who is actually speaking. It's nice to get down these basic conversations. The main conversation of the Bhagavatam, of course, is Shukadeva Goswami speaking to Maharaj Parikshit, and so this verse is speaking about that discussion, and it's spoken by Shonaka Rishi, and he's speaking to Sutta Goswami. And does everybody know where they're speaking at? Naimisharanya. Sri Harinam Prabhu knows. So, the previous verse, Shonaka Rishi is speaking. He glorifies Maharaj Parikshit as a devotee, and now he's glorifying Shukadeva Goswami as a devotee. And the word used for a devotee in Sanskrit is satam. And he's saying here that because both of them were devotees of Krishna, that there must have only been topics discussed about Krishna. So they weren't discussing anything else. And so this is a point where this is like, in these last three chapters of the first three chapters of the second canto is the beginning of Shukadeva Goswami's teachings to Maharaj Parikshit. And here we're hearing that this other conversation, Shonaka Rishi, the sages at Naimisharanya, and spoken by Sutta Goswami, he's speaking about the conversation of Shukadeva Goswami to Maharaj Parikshit. And the sages, headed by Shonaka Rishi, are saying, what you've spoken is very good so far. We want to keep hearing it. We want to keep going with this discussion. So, does anybody know the title of the first chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam? Title of the first chapter of the first canto? Questions by the sages. Yes. And who are the sages? The sages of Naimisharanya, headed by Shonaka Rishi. So, this is the very beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And does anybody know some of the questions that they asked? Some of the questions that were asked by the sages? Because this is important to understand from this verse. They're saying, we like what you're saying so far, keep going. So they asked these questions from the beginning, and they're liking what they're hearing from this discussion. Does anybody know those questions? Some of them, or one of them? Yes, Prabhu?
The purpose of the scriptures.
What is the purpose of the scriptures? purpose of the scriptures. That's close, yeah. One of the questions they asked was, what is the essence of all scriptures? What is the essence of all scriptures? So, as you all probably know, the background information at the that Naimisharanya, they're wondering what to do for they're at the beginning of Kali Yuga. They're trying to perform fire sacrifices for the well-being of the planet Earth, as they see the forecomings of Kali Yuga, and they're wondering what to do there. And they were getting frustrated with just performing fire sacrifices, and then ultimately they came to ask Sutta Goswami to speak what he heard because Sutta Goswami was present where Shukadev Goswami spoke to Maharaj Parikshit. Is this everybody familiar with this plot line of the Srimad Bhagavatam? Yeah. So that's one of the questions. Does anybody know another question? Yes, Prabhu.
There are three questions related to Krishna's pastimes.
Yeah. 3 questions directly related to Krishna's pastimes. Why does he appear in the womb of Devaki, the son of as the son of Vasudeva? Which basically means like, why did he appear as Krishna specifically, like the Krishna as Krishna? And then he asked also about the other avatars. They said that we're eager to hear about the personality of Godhead in his many incarnations. And then they also asked, please narrate the transcendental pastimes. The pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I heard in Burijan Prabhu's book, he said the distinction between these two is one of them is about the Leela avatars, and then one of them is about the Purusha avatars. So they wanted to hear about the Leela avatars of Krishna and about the Purusha avatars. So that's in the Sri Laghu Bhagavatamrita. There's a nice description. Rupa Goswami he breaks down the categories of incarnations of the Supreme Lord. Starting with the Swayam Bhagavan. Does everybody know this? Familiar with this term, Swayam Bhagavan? Swayam Bhagavan. So the Swayam Bhagavan, that's a big term. I've heard it's called, this is part of the Paribhasya Sutra of the Srimad Bhagavatam. As Ete Chamsa Kala Pumsa, Krishnas tu Bhagavan Swayam. Krishnas tu Bhagavan Swayam. So that's one of the most important verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam, that there's many incarnations, but Krishna is the Swayam Bhagavan. He's the origin of all other incarnations. So this is a very specific to Gaudiya Vaishnava theology, that Krishna in Vrindavan is the Swayam Bhagavan. There's other authorized lineages of Vaishnavas who accept Vishnu as the Supreme Bhagavan, and that Krishna is just an avatar of Vishnu. So Vishnu is the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Creator of the universes, and then he also descends in these Leela avatars for a different purpose, to attract our attention. But originally Vishnu is supreme, and these other avatars are subordinate. But the Gaudiya Vaishnava theology, based on the Srimad Bhagavatam, explains that Krishna in Vrindavan is Swayam Bhagavan. So Vishnu actually is a Purusha avatar of Krishna, and Krishna as Swayam Bhagavan, he expands himself, and all other incarnations and expansions come from the original personality of Godhead, Krishna, in Vrindavan. And this is the theology of the Srimad Bhagavatam. I was hearing a lecture by Radhika Raman about the Tattva Sandarbha, and he explained this point very clearly, that the teachings of the Srimad Bhagavatam are the basis of our Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, and he explains how it's very important to understand this link between the Srimad Bhagavatam and Lord Chaitanya's teachings. He explained that Lord Chaitanya's teachings and the Srimad Bhagavatam's teachings are the same, and this is very important to understand the roots of our tradition and why we worship Krishna. Why don't we worship anybody else? The Srimad Bhagavatam is the foundation of our understanding. So the Srimad Bhagavatam explains that Krishna is Swayam Bhagavan, and all other incarnations and expansions come from him. And then there's these Purusha avatars, and then there's Leela avatars. So the Purusha avatars are the Vishnu's expansions of Krishna, and they deal with the creation of the material universes. We see because we hear about Krishna so much, we develop a taste for hearing about Krishna's pastimes. It becomes obvious to us that Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan are more relishable than just meditating on the creation and destruction of the unlimited universes. So it's more a question of rasa, experience of relationships with Krishna, that makes Krishna the complete personality of Godhead. This ability to have a loving relationship with Krishna, and the sweetness and the happiness that we get from worshiping Krishna in Vrindavan. This is what distinguishes and makes it, and from the Gaudiya Vaishnava theology, higher than the worship of Vishnu, is the level of intimacy that we can have with Krishna in Vrindavan. That's Krishna has this form. He's a young boy, as we were hearing from Srila Prabhupada yesterday. Srila Prabhupada nicely explained that when you think of God as the Father or the Supreme Controller, the next thing is to ask for something. We want to take. We want, like Srila Prabhupada was saying, the Father is always there, and the children are always saying, "Please give me this, please give me this." And so that's the relationship with Krishna when we have just this understanding of the Supreme Controller, the Supreme Maintainer. But Srila Prabhupada went on to explain that when Krishna is a boy, and the devotees take on the relationship of father or friend, then it's about giving to Krishna. It's about the devotee takes on this role of serving Krishna, not just trying to take from Krishna. And the happiness that comes from that service is called prema. It's this exchange of pure love. So there's a nice quote from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. He says something like, "Engage me in your service with love as my pay. Engage me in your service with love as my pay." So this is the idea that we engage in service to this Swayam Bhagavan Krishna in Vrindavan, and then we get this highest happiness, but this pure love, and that's the goal. So that's the goal of Krishna consciousness. So our acharyas break down the entire teachings into these three categories. There's Sambandha Gyan, then there's the Abhideya, and then there's Prayojana. So the Sambandha Gyan is understanding Krishna's position, the Swayam Bhagavan, the expansions, the avatars, the material world, the living entities. Sambandha Gyan, understanding the whole conception. And then there's Abhideya. This is the bhakti process, understanding the process, what do we do now that we understand Krishna's position, now we understand our position in the material world, and then what do we do about it? What is the practical application of this knowledge, this understanding? That's the abhideya, the bhakti process. And then the goal, what do we get from it? This is called prayojana. So the prayojana is Krishna prema, pure love. We get this unlimited happiness, actually. Unlimited happiness from serving Krishna. So this we have to take based on the scriptures and the revelation of our acharyas. We have to understand this goal. If we're going to keep going on the prayojana, on the process, we have to have an understanding of the goal and why we're doing it if we want to keep going deeper and deeper. So the goal is this pure love of Krishna. And we have to hear about that to keep going, because there's many obstacles on the process of bhakti. There's many distractions. But we have to keep in mind the goal. Srila Prabhupada says that in the purport in the Bhagavad Gita, I can't remember which verse, but he says that mind is disturbed due to a lack of a goal. So we should make our goal this Krishna prema. So instead of so many other things, the Bhagavad Gita says that Jehi samsparsa ja bhoga dukkha yonaya evate adyantavanti konteya nateshu ramate buddha. So most times we're trying to seek happiness through the gratification of our senses, through having a nice external environment. But he says that this happiness, it doesn't last. So ultimately it leads to unhappiness. So prema is, I don't obviously have very much experience with this higher happiness. We get a little bit of glimpses of tastes of it just from the beginning processes, the practice of bhakti. But the acharyas explain that this is what we actually are after, this Krishna prema. So that's the prayojana. So the sambandha, getting back to the sambandha, that's a little bit more in my realm of experience and understanding. The sambandha of the Bhagavatam, the understanding is very it's very specific and it's very detailed, and the basics are explained. That there's ultimately it comes down to that there's a supreme person, that there's a source of everything, and that source is a person, and the person has qualities and potencies, and so this is like a foundation before you get to understanding Krishna and Vrindavan and the rasa. The foundation is understanding these principles, that there's a supreme person, and that there's the material energy, and that we're the living entities, and we are in a compromised condition. We're in a compromised condition, that's explained. We are in the Bhagavad Gita, it explains that he gives an introduction to breaking down the material energy, and then he explains that the living entity is a superior energy, but it's being controlled by this material energy. And so the living entities, we're in a compromised situation, and we want to get back to our original state. That's the basics. There's the Supreme Lord and His internal energy, and then there's the living entities who are in between, and then there's the external energy. And then, like I was saying before, the process of transferring from the external energy to the internal energy, the material to the spiritual, this is bhakti. Bhakti is the most it's the easiest and the most sufficient process. There's all other spiritual processes are leading to this, bringing the living entity out of the material energy into the spiritual energy. So, and of the bhakti process, there's this, one of the main things is hearing and chanting. So that's where this verse is speaking on. It's explaining that Shukadev Goswami is a pure devotee, and he's discussing with Maharaj Parikshit. And since they're both devotees, surely they just only spoke about Krishna. And the next verse is a really famous verse. I'll just read it too, because it has to do with it. It says, "Both by rising and by setting, the sun decreases the duration of life of everyone, except one who utilizes the time by discussing topics of the all-good personality of Godhead. Do the trees not live? Do the bellows of the blacksmith not breathe? All around us, do the beasts not eat and discharge semen? Men who are like dogs, hogs, camels, and asses praise those men who never listen to the transcendental pastimes of Lord Sri Krishna, the deliverer from evil. One who has not listened to the messages about the prowess and marvelous acts of the personality of Godhead, and has not sung or chanted loudly the worldly songs about the Lord, is to be considered to possess ear holes like the holes of snakes, and a tongue like the tongue of a frog." So this is explaining the potency and the importance of hearing about Krishna, and that everything else to be heard is not worthy of being heard. There's this really nice poetry there that by the rising and the setting of the sun, our life is being decreased. But if we utilize our time by discussing the topics of Krishna, then we make progress on bhakti. So we're not influenced by this time factor, rising and setting of the sun, which takes away the life of everybody. So utilizing our time by discussing the topics about Krishna is being described here as the best use of time. So gathering with sincere devotees and discussing the topics of Krishna. And the best way to do that is by centering our lives and our relationships around Srila Prabhupada's books. If we're not able to just spontaneously speak about Krishna out of our memory, we have memorized all the shlokas and all the pastimes, all the stories about Krishna, we may not have them in our memory to just start speaking about them. But by reading Srila Prabhupada's books regularly in association of devotees, this is, from my experience, this is the most effective way of getting absorbed in this Krishna Katha, this talks and discussions about Krishna. So developing relationships based around reading Srila Prabhupada's books. From my experience, it's the most systematic way of getting a full understanding of Krishna consciousness. You may hear lectures here and there sporadically, which is it's still hearing about Krishna, and it's ultimately very beneficial. But to get the whole concept, the whole theology, the Sambandha, the Abhideya, the Prayojana, get it all in line, to Prabhupada explained, to go systematically through his books. This is the best way to get a complete understanding of the teachings of Krishna consciousness. What ashram you're in, like here in the purport, it explained that Maharaj Parikshit was a great king, and Shukadev Goswami was a renunciate. He wasn't even wearing clothes. Said he did not even put a cloth on his body. He's completely in the stage of Paramahamsa stage, and so he showed up where Maharaj Parikshit was sitting, and he didn't have any clothes on, and he just spoke the Bhagavatam to him. So this is Shukadeva Goswami, and then Maharaj Parikshit's a great king. So it's saying that it doesn't matter if you're a renunciate or a grihastha. Bhaktivinoda Thakur makes this statement too in one of his bhajans. Just absorb yourself in the sound vibration of Krishna Katha, the holy name, Harinam, and Krishna Katha. There's a famous quote by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta too, that he's saying that, he used very technical language. He says that Krishna Katha is the Swarup Shakti of the holy name. So Swarup Shakti means the internal potency. So the Krishna Katha is the Swarup Shakti of the Harinam. So he's saying that if you're doing Harinam without Krishna Katha, it's basically empty. There's very little potency in it. So he explained that the Swarup Shakti, the internal potency of the holy name, is Krishna Katha, hearing topics about Krishna. So to get the most out of chanting the holy name, we have to go side by side, hearing and chanting. And anybody can do that from any stage of life. I've seen also the last two, besides this year, the last two Kartiks before this past year, I spent the month in Govardhan with Vaisheshika Prabhu and Keshava Bharati Goswami, and so they just based their whole Kartik vow on reading the Srimad Bhagavatam out loud as a group. So I spent the last two times, besides this last one, there just in that association, just based around Srila Prabhupada's books, getting the sound vibration out. We would do 5 hours every day for the whole month of Kartik. 5 hours of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam being read aloud by really senior devotees, Vaisheshika Prabhu and Keshava Bharati Maharaj. They would, just those two would read, and everyone else in the room would listen. And the effect of that on the consciousness is just amazing. Hearing, we would go through like 3 or 4 cantos of the Bhagavatam in the month, and in the purports, like hearing Srila Prabhupada's purports so much, it just changes everything, the way you think and the way you act, and it changes your consciousness. That was when I first started practicing Krishna consciousness. I got the Bhagavad Gita from a traveling brahmachari, and I didn't understand like anything that was being said in the verses. Like, it was like so many different names of Krishna and Vishnu, and I didn't understand it, but Prabhupada's analogies and Prabhupada's stories and the way that he explains the philosophy, his English is so profound in his purports. So this is where Prabhupada put his heart and soul into his purports, and it changes the consciousness of everyone who hears it, and so especially hearing it out loud in a group of devotees, as this is saying, to get the right conception of Krishna consciousness, to do it with devotees. And it is hard. We have a tendency to talk about all the things in our life. This person said this, and this is for dinner, and this is that, and this is that. This person said this country is doing that. All these things, these discussions are so powerful. It's so easy to get distracted by this, as Rupa Goswami explains in the Nectar of Instruction. He explains that there's 6 things that are unfavorable for the process of bhakti, and one of those is prajalpa, so unnecessary talk. I find this to be a very difficult one to overcome. It's so common when we get together, we just start talking and talking and talking, and it's fun to talk, and we need to reveal our mind and things like that. But to reveal our mind and to associate with devotees based on the topics of Krishna, this is pretty revolutionary. It changes everything. If you have your association built around Srila Prabhupada's books, it's very, very powerful. To read the whole Srimad Bhagavatam is one of the greatest fortunes. There's people have everything materially. They can have a great job, they can have a big house and all these things, but if they don't have time to read the Srimad Bhagavatam, I consider them to be very unfortunate. Srila Prabhupada gave us this whole 12 cantos, and to read through it is the greatest fortune. The greatest fortune we can have to develop this proper understanding of Krishna, to accompany our chanting. We should be reading through all of Prabhupada's books, and it can be done if it's done regularly. You develop momentum. You develop momentum if you stick to it every day. It's very important for your Krishna consciousness to read all of Prabhupada's books. It's our greatest wealth. It's Prabhupada's gift to us, his books and his purports. He woke up every morning, before he did anything, he just immediately started translating his books while everybody else is sleeping. If you've been to like one place I've been to, like Hawaii, the Hawaii Temple, there's a place where Srila Prabhupada, there's many temples around the world, they have the place where Prabhupada stayed, they still maintain it, Prabhupada's quarters, like in Vrindavan, in Mayapur, Los Angeles, Melbourne. I haven't been there, in Mayapur. They're all very similar. There's like this similar setup with his bed and where he translated, and there's pictures of him and some paraphernalia. And you get that feeling like, wow, and what was Srila Prabhupada doing in that room? He was translating his books. He was translating his books in that room. Obviously other things too, letters and holding Sangha for people to come see him. But every morning he was waking up and doing the same program, translating his books. So yeah, we should try to read all of Srila Prabhupada's books. We should try to read all of Srila Prabhupada's books. Many times I've heard that, like, of course, sannyasis are I've heard that, like, I think I was hearing about, like, Shivaram Swami, one of his disciples was telling me that at one point he had read all of Srila Prabhupada's books like 30 times or something like that, and he was still, like, just still eager to keep reading it. So I find I oftentimes base my spiritual life based on, like, when I'm going to finish the next book. Like, I try to plan out my life, like, okay, by next year I'll be finished with the Srimad Bhagavatam for this amount of time, and then I'm going to start the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So basing our life around this hearing process, this is how we advance in our understanding of Krishna consciousness. There's other ways. Other people have, some people don't have as much proclivity to study and hear. There's other ways to if you just keep engaging in service and hearing as much as you can, that's good, but it's very important to try your best to go through Prabhupada's books. And he gave us so much to read. It's like way too much to read, but we have to try. We have to try our best. The whole 12 cantos of the Bhagavatam and the long purports. From my experience, the purports, they get easier to read because the Prabhupada makes the same points so many times, and you keep hearing it, and then you just accept it more. Every time you hear it again and again, you accept it again and again, and then you move on from there, and then you keep reading it. It's kind of like chanting japa, although it's the same mantra every time, but the more you hear it, the more you understand. So the same thing with Prabhupada's purports. It's kind of like mantras, like the mundane scholars, he says the same things, like the material energy and the living entity is not the body, he should go back to Godhead. There's all these famous phrases in his purports that become like mantras, and they change the way we think. We develop our conception of life based on Srila Prabhupada's purports. And they have a very powerful effect. And so Srila Prabhupada translated this Srimad Bhagavatam into English for our great benefit, and so we can hear what this verse is glorifying. This verse is glorifying the discussion between Shukadeva Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit. He's saying that they're both very great devotees, so they must have just spoken about Krishna. And so the best way, like I've been saying, for us to follow in their footsteps is to hear through Srila Prabhupada's books these elevated discussions. So we can take advantage of this transcendental sound vibration of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So I'll stop there. If anybody has any comments or questions, thoughts to share, we got a few minutes. If anybody has anything. Yeah, there's a microphone. I think it's behind that little picture on top of the speaker. Yeah.
What do you think about Srila Prabhupada's books in audio format?
What do I think? It's the same as Prabhupada's books. Yeah, it's hearing Prabhupada's books. It's hearing somebody else recite Srila Prabhupada's books, so in a recorded format. So if you hear through it from beginning to end, that's the main point, is to hear the books systematically through. Prabhupada repeated that many times, not to jump straight to the 10th canto, or what to speak of other books of commentaries of the pastimes of Radha and Krishna, to try to jump into that sphere before systematically going through his books repeatedly, actually. It's not that we should read even just once the Bhagavatam and read the CC and then jump over to all these other books they may be very nice books, but from my understanding and what I'm trying to share is to go through Prabhupada's books systematically is very important for developing the proper conception of Krishna consciousness. Very important. Yeah, and whichever way you do that, audiobook is definitely there. Keshava Bharati Maharaj is working on an audiobook with purports of the whole Bhagavatam. So I'm not sure if there is one now. I think they're just verses. There's one on YouTube. Do you want to share that online, on the microphone?
The audiobook of Srimad Bhagavatam.
There is.
So, when we read, I personally find it really helpful when I'm reading the audiobook and reading the text together, because so that I don't jump too fast, so that I have that time to sink into the words that Prabhupada is actually telling. And there's another way that one devotee shared. Whenever you start to read Prabhupada, you can actually say your name at the beginning, that Srila Prabhupada is talking to you. So you personalize it how he's speaking to you, so that it actually makes sense. Just like in class when teacher actually tells your name and explains something, it becomes personal. And that's how we, because I teach, so I have seen that in students that they actually feel that I'm giving this instruction to them when I actually tell their name at the beginning. So it's really a good way. So at the beginning of the purport, you tell your name, that Srila Prabhupada is telling to yourself. And then read. So that's just, I'm just sharing what I found it.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. Anything else, Prabhu?
6 questions of the sages. We mentioned 4. One is, the last one is, whereas Krishna, principles of relation go on after Krishna disappeared.
Yeah.
The 6th one?
The 6th one, it's actually the first one we didn't get to. It's like, what is the ultimate good? What is the absolute and ultimate good for all people in general? What is the absolute and ultimate good for all people
In an easily understandable way.
in an easily understandable way. Yeah. That's the main question, really. That's the beginning, the foundation.
My question is, does Ujjan Prabhu say something about the sequence of the questions? It seems like if they're asking about Krishna, then the Leela avatars, and then Purusha avatars, which means like they were asking, well, tell us about Krishna, but we first have to understand the Leela avatars. Actually, we have to first understand the Purusha avatars. Shukadeva Goswami kind of responds to the question through the Bhagavatam in the inverse order. Is there a reason for that?
In the inverse order. Like he goes through the Purusha avatars and then the Leela avatars and then Srimad Bhagavatam.
Yeah, but the sages they were asking
Yeah.
Krishna, and so is there any reason for that?
Well, I mean, Srila Prabhupada explains that by hearing the first 9 cantos, you become qualified to hear the 10th canto. So to understand the concept of Swayam Bhagavan Krishna in Goloka Vrindavan, he explains that you first go through these foundational teachings of the Purusha avatars, the creation of the universes, the Leela avatars, the different Leela avatars teach different aspects of the process also. And Srila Prabhupada explains by getting through the first 9 cantos, it prepares you to hear the 10th canto about Krishna directly. So,
One reason the avatars are mentioned is so people can understand who God is and who is not God. That's why they're asking, because they want to understand who Krishna is.
okay. So the Leela avatars are mentioned to distinguish who is God and who is not God.
Just the avatars in general, the question first off is just about the general, like all the avatars. Then they ask specifically about Leela avatars, so they can't hear the pastime. They're asking about the avatars, so they can understand what are the characteristics of avatars, so they can understand who is God. Is this something achieving information?
Thank you.
Right at the beginning of the Bhagavatam, says all this other stuff kicked out. These character development.
Alright. Anything else? Alright, thank you all for listening. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.